We know a lot, and yet we know nothing is set in stone. There's still the possibility that we could see Sam Altman return. What do you make of this situation?
I think fluid, dynamic, unpredictable, all of the above. And I think what we can try to read between the lines here, there is some things that we can take away. First and foremost, when you do the game theory, is that OpenAI's current board is going to be on their way out. I don't see any scenario where they can survive. So why is that important is that it essentially leaves this power struggle, or the opportunity to decide what to do, is in the hands of Altman. And again, if he stays at Microsoft, effectively OpenAI would shut down. So therefore, the board would lose all power, because the company, really, there wouldn't be a company left if 700 employees left, or even if 200 left. I think it would be difficult for them to survive. So I think that this opportunity for Altman to basically decide where he wants to take this. And I think that another piece, that's one thing that's clear, is this Altman has the upper hand here. A second is that Microsoft has a strong hand. They obviously have a home for Altman, but if it goes back to status quo, they got a good relationship going there. And I think the third biggest takeaway for me here is probably the real near-term winner is going to be these employees, these developers, highly sought after. Yes, they will lose some equity in OpenAI if, in fact, the company doesn't survive, but they're also going to be positioned for some nice pay raises, whether they go to Microsoft or to Google or Apple. So I think that is another dynamic to this, is that these developers are going to be well off.
Yeah, it's about the talent, right? And we're already seeing the likes of Mark Benioff swooping in, offering to, match pay for anyone who's so disenchanted with this whole situation that they want to leave now. Where do you think the natural home is, though, for this talent? Is it Microsoft first, and then some of the other competitors, Apple, Google, onwards from that?
It probably is. I mean, this, from the natural home, it's Microsoft, because of Altman, because of just, we're seeing how strong of a figure is. I knew he had a lot of influence at OpenAI, but I didn't predict it to be as strong as it is. And so wherever he goes, so if we take the route that he goes to Microsoft, that would be the natural home. But I'm sure those developers are going to be shopping around. And this is the opportunity that Google has been waiting for. They've been working on AI as a top priority since 2017, and they've been behind what OpenAI is doing. And so this is a talent race. Don't make any mistake about it. And so this is, I think, an opportunity. So I think Google is the next natural home for this. And then last is Apple has been quiet, of course, on the whole AI front. And I think that there's an opportunity for them to gain talent. That's something that they've talked more about, or has been reported more by Bloomberg, by Mark Gurman, and their initiatives to do more in generative AI. This would be just the prime opportunity for them to grab some talent, for Apple to grab some talent. So that's how I'd put the order. Microsoft's the biggest beneficiary, followed by Google and Apple.
It's interesting because we're still sort of trying to work out how this came about, right? The issue of candidness, the communication from Sam Altman. Was there ultimately, do you think, a disagreement over the speed to which this technology was going to be commercialized, that there was a fundamental disagreement on how that should be handled?
I think that's one piece, the speed of commercialization, but I think the other piece, and maybe even just taking a step back, is the board. This is a nonprofit initially, and the board's mandate was in part to be judicious in terms of how AI is going to reach the world. And so the board was doing their job, because I think that at the end of the day, is Sam Altman wasn't honest with the board about how he wanted to commercialize it, specifically how he wanted to open it up and allow AI to do more than what the board was comfortable with. And so those go hand in hand, that idea of opening AI, opening the models up to do more, and also commercialization. And so I think that was the rift, is and understandable. Again, I mean, both parties were doing their jobs. The unfortunate part for the board is I think they grossly underestimated the strength that Altman had with the employee base. But I think that was the rift. And ultimately, if the board's going to be gone, so if Altman goes back, by the way, that is my prediction. What happens here? I think he's actually going to return to OpenAI. If he goes back to OpenAI, they're going to be more aggressive at opening these models up. And if he stays with Microsoft, they're going to be more aggressive. And I think at the end of the day, you're probably going to see faster adoption of AI features it's been coming at a neck break speed, but I think it's going to be even faster based on everything that's happened here. This is really allowing Altman to take his gloves off and probably do what he's wanted to do for the last 8 years.
If you take a look at the bigger picture of, as you've said, it's maybe surprising how much clout Sam Altman has. We knew that he had clout. He was, the person that kind of set this off in the first place. But does this create some interesting questions about, backers like Microsoft, the fact that these outfits will need to raise a lot more money in terms of R&D and progressing the development of, general artificial intelligence? And what does that mean in terms of having a say in the governance side of things?
So Microsoft has a big influence because they have a big influence with Sam, and his, of course, his role is important. The money picture for companies like Microsoft, all the big tech, the money, even though the numbers are seemingly big, they're really insignificant in the grand scheme of what their market caps are. We're talking close to $3 trillion in market cap for Microsoft. To put an extra 10 billion or 20 billion or 50 billion into something here, it really doesn't move the needle relative to what they have on their market cap. So I think that this is a big opportunity ultimately for Microsoft to play a bigger role in terms of how this technology comes to market.
So, Jen, if you, as an investor, would you be happy to write a check the size of which AI development is going to need, but not have as much of a decision when it comes to governance? Is that what's playing out at the moment?
I think that's effectively, for investors who are in OpenAI, I think that's going to be the rub. Is if they're invested here, they're just not going to have as big of an impact on governance. And I think that that's going to be ultimately a problem. In the case of Microsoft, they're going to have a big impact on that. There is this higher level topic that's orbiting around, which is the government is going to have an impact on a lot of governance on AI too. And so I think that Microsoft is probably the biggest impact, and they want to have a say in that. And so they're willing to show up and put the money in. Satya made it very clear they're behind this, and so they're willing to show up because they want to have that big influence. And that regulation piece, you're hitting the right point. That's a huge X factor to how the pace that this impacts our lives.